Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell had never been the type to back down from a challenge. At 32 years old, she had spent the last decade proving herself in the United States Navy, rising through the ranks despite the doubts that seemed to follow her everywhere she went. But nothing in her military career had prepared her for what would happen on a quiet Tuesday evening in the small coastal town of Bridgeport, California. Sarah had just finished her shift at the Naval Recruitment Office downtown. She was tired, her feet aching from standing most of the day, answering questions from young people who dreamed of serving their country. Some looked at her uniform with respect. Others, particularly the older men who wandered in, seemed surprised to see a woman wearing the bars of a lieutenant commander. The sun was setting as she walked toward her car in the parking lot behind Main Street. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the smell of salt water from the nearby harbor. She was thinking about her daughter, Emma, who was waiting at home with Sarah's mother. Emma was only 7 years old, bright-eyed and curious, always asking questions about her mother's work. "Mommy, do you fly planes?" Emma had asked that morning. "No, sweetheart," Sarah had replied, kneeling down to tie her daughter's shoes. "But I help train the people who protect our country." "Like a teacher." "Something like that." Sarah smiled at the memory as she reached for her car door. That's when she heard the commotion. Down the alley, near the dumpsters behind the hardware store, 3 men had cornered someone against the brick wall. Sarah's training kicked in immediately. She moved closer, her hand instinctively touching the pepper spray on her keychain. As she approached, she could see them more clearly. 3 large men, probably in their 30s, wearing work boots and stained jackets. They were surrounding a young woman who couldn't have been more than 19 or 20. The girl's face was streaked with tears, her hands shaking as she held her purse close to her chest. "Please," the girl was saying, "just leave me alone." "We just want to talk, sweetheart," one of the men said, his voice dripping with false kindness. He had a thick beard and tattoos running up his neck. "You've been walking past our shop every day. Thought it was time we got to know you." "I said no," the girl replied, her voice stronger now despite her fear. "I have a boyfriend." "Don't see him here," another man laughed. This one was stockier, with a shaved head and a gold chain around his neck. Sarah had seen enough. She stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. "Gentlemen, I think the lady has made herself clear. Time to move along." All 3 men turned to look at her. For a moment, there was silence. Then the one with the beard started laughing. "Well, well," he said, looking her up and down. "What do we have here, lady cop?" "Navy officer," Sarah corrected him. "And I'm asking you politely to leave this young woman alone." The stocky one snorted. "Navy, you mean like a secretary or something?" "I mean like someone who's giving you a chance to walk away before this becomes a problem," Sarah said evenly. The 3rd man, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. He was the tallest of the 3, with cold gray eyes and a scar across his left cheek. "Listen, lady, this ain't your business. Why don't you run along back to your desk or wherever it is you push papers?" Sarah felt the familiar anger rising in her chest. She had heard variations of this her entire career. The assumption that because she was a woman, she must be in some administrative role. Never mind her certifications, her combat training, her years of service. But anger wouldn't help the frightened girl behind these men. "Last warning," Sarah said quietly. "Step away from her now." The bearded man took a step towards Sarah. "Or what? You going to arrest us? You got no authority here, sweetheart. No badge, no gun." He looked her up and down again, his expression mocking. "Just a pretty little uniform." Sarah was about to respond when she heard a voice from behind her. "Is there a problem here?" She turned to see a man in his late 50s approaching from the street. He was tall and lean, with silver hair cut military short and sharp blue eyes that took in the situation immediately. He wore jeans and a plain gray sweatshirt, but there was something in the way he carried himself that spoke of authority and discipline. The 3 men seemed less confident now, The one with the scar frowned. "This ain't your business either, old man." The newcomer smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "I'm making it my business. The officer asked you to leave. I suggest you listen to her." "Or what?" the stocky one challenged. "You and the Girl Scout here going to make us?" That's when the young woman they had cornered found her chance. She ducked under the bearded man's arm and ran toward Sarah, who quickly moved to shield her. "You okay?" Sarah asked quietly. The girl nodded, though she was still shaking. Thank you so much." The three men looked angry now. The one with the scar pointed at Sarah and the older man. "You two just made a big mistake. We know people in this town. You have no idea who you're messing with." "Funny," the older man said calmly. "I was about to say the same thing to you." The bearded man took a step forward, his fists clenched. "You think you're tough? Let's see how tough you are." What happened next took less than 10 seconds. The bearded man swung first, a wide haymaker aimed at the older man's head. But the punch never landed. The older man moved with a speed that seemed impossible for someone his age, stepping inside the attack and delivering a short, sharp strike to the bearded man's ribs. The man gasped and stumbled backward. The stocky one came next, trying to grab the older man from behind. But again, that fluid movement, that perfect economy of motion. The stocky man found himself face down on the pavement, his arm twisted behind his back in a hold that looked painful but controlled. The one with the scar looked at his two friends, then at the older man, and apparently decided that discretion was the better part of valor. He helped the bearded man to his feet while the older man released the stocky one. "Get out of here," the older man said quietly. "And if I hear about you bothering anyone else in this town, we'll have another conversation, a longer one." The three men retreated, throwing angry looks over their shoulders but clearly unwilling to press their luck any further. Sarah watched them go, then turned to the older man. "That was impressive, military." He nodded. "A long time ago, Navy like you." He extended his hand. "Jack Collins." "Sarah Mitchell," she replied, shaking his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Thank you for the backup." "Thank you for stepping in," he said. "Not many people would have." The young woman they had helped was on her phone now, calling someone. Sarah could hear her saying she was okay, that some people had helped her, that she'd be home soon. When the girl finished her call, Sarah asked, "Are you all right? Do you need a ride somewhere? Should we call the police?" The girl hesitated. I don't know. I mean, they didn't actually hurt me. And they're right about one thing. They do know people in this town. The one with the beard, Danny Reichert, his uncle is on the city council. People say he gets away with stuff because of it." Sarah felt her jaw tighten. She had seen this before, in different forms. People who thought they were above consequences because of who they knew. "What's your name?" she asked gently. Jessica Horn." "Jessica, what happened here was harassment at minimum, assault if they touched you. You have every right to report it." Jessica looked down at her feet. "My mom, she'll be so worried, and I have classes tomorrow. I just want to go home." Sarah understood. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Jessica. "If you change your mind or if they bother you again, call me. Anytime." Jessica took the card gratefully. "Thank you, both of you. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't come along." After Jessica left, Sarah turned back to Jack Collins. There was something familiar about him, though she couldn't quite place it. "You live in Bridgeport?" she asked. "Just visiting," he said. "My daughter lives here. I'm staying with her and my granddaughter for a few weeks." Sarah felt a small chill run down her spine. "Your granddaughter?" "Emma," he said with a warm smile. 7 years old, talks about her mom constantly, says her mom is the bravest person in the whole world." Sarah's eyes widened. You're my father-in-law." Jack's smile grew wider. "Was wondering when you'd figure it out. We've never actually met in person. I was deployed when you and David got married, and then—" His smile faded slightly. Well, it's been a complicated few years. Sarah knew what he meant. Her husband, David Collins, had died 3 years ago in a training accident. She and Jack had spoken on the phone a few times, but he had been stationed overseas, working on classified projects. This was the first time they had ever been face to face. "Emma didn't tell me you were coming," Sarah said. "It was a surprise. I wanted to spend some time with her, with both of you if you'll have me around." Sarah felt emotions welling up that she had pushed down for years. Her daughter's grandfather, David's father, standing here after helping her face down 3 men in an alley. "Of course," she managed to say, "we'd love to have you." They walked back to the parking lot together, talking about Emma, about David, about the strange coincidence that had brought them together tonight. Sarah drove home with Jack following in his rental car, both of them unaware that the 3 men from the alley were watching from a distance, making plans of their own. The next morning started like any other. Sarah woke at 5:30, went for her usual run through the quiet streets of Bridgeport, and returned home to find Emma already awake and chattering excitedly with her grandfather over pancakes. "Grandpa says he used to jump out of airplanes," Emma announced as Sarah walked into the kitchen. "Did he now?" Sarah smiled, pouring herself coffee. Jack winked at his granddaughter. "A few times, but your mom has done some pretty amazing things too." Emma beamed with pride. Sarah's mother, Grace, who lived with them and helped care for Emma, was setting the table. She had taken to Jack immediately, grateful to have another person who understood the weight of military service. "I still can't believe we finally met under those circumstances," Jack said after Emma had run upstairs to get ready for school. "What are the odds?" "Small town," Sarah replied, "but I'm glad you were there, those men." She trailed off, thinking about Jessica Horn and the fear in her eyes. "You think they'll cause trouble?" Grace asked, concern in her voice. "I hope not," Sarah said, but something in her gut told her it wasn't over. She was right. By the time Sarah arrived at the recruitment office at 8 o'clock, there was already a police car parked outside. Officer Tom Bradley, a man she had met a few times at community events, was waiting by the door. "Commander Mitchell," he said, touching the brim of his hat, "got a few questions for you if you have a minute." "Of course, what's this about?" "Got a complaint filed this morning. 3 men saying you and an older gentleman assaulted them in an alley last night. Unprovoked attack, they claim." Sarah felt ice in her veins. "That's not what happened." "Didn't think so," Bradley said with a slight smile. "Danny Reichert has filed complaints before, usually doesn't amount to much, but his uncle is pushing for us to take this one seriously. There was a young woman they were harassing, Jessica Horn. She'll tell you the truth." Bradley's expression darkened. "Already spoke to Miss Horn this morning. She says she doesn't remember any harassment, says it was just a friendly conversation that you and your friend misunderstood." Sarah's hands clenched into fists. "They got to her." "Probably. The Reicherts have deep roots in this town. People are scared of them." He paused. "I'm going to need you to come down to the station, give a formal statement. Just a formality, you understand. But with the uncle making noise, we have to follow procedure." Sarah spent the next 2 hours at the police station, recounting everything that had happened. She could tell that Bradley believed her, but she could also see the worry in his eyes. This wasn't just about truth anymore. It was about politics and power. When she finally left the station, she found Jack waiting in the parking lot, leaning against his rental car. "Your mother called me," he explained. "Told me what was happening, thought you might need some support." "They're claiming we attacked them," Sarah said, her frustration evident. "And Jessica is too scared to tell the truth." Jack's expression was grim. "I was afraid of this. Men like that don't like being embarrassed. They'll push back." "I can handle it," Sarah said, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. "I've dealt with worse." "I don't doubt it," Jack said, but you don't have to handle it alone. They drove back to Sarah's house together. Emma was at school and Grace had gone grocery shopping. The house was quiet. Sarah made tea while Jack sat at the kitchen table, looking at the photos on the wall. Pictures of David in his uniform, of Emma as a baby, of Sarah's graduation from officer training. "David was proud of you," Jack said quietly. "He told me once that you were the strongest person he'd ever met, not just physically but in here." He tapped his chest. "In your heart." Sarah felt tears prickling at her eyes. She still missed David every day. The way he laughed, the way he always knew how to make her feel better after a difficult day. "I wish he was here," she said softly. "So do I," Jack replied. "But he'd want you to keep fighting, to not let people like the Reicherts intimidate you." Sarah nodded, wiping her eyes. "I won't, but I'm worried about Jessica. She's so young and she's scared. I don't blame her for backing down." "Maybe she just needs to see that standing up to them is possible," Jack suggested. Before Sarah could respond, her phone rang. It was her commanding officer, Captain Reynolds, calling from the regional office in San Diego. "Commander Mitchell," Reynolds said, his voice formal. "I've received a complaint from Bridgeport City officials regarding an incident last night. I need you to come to San Diego tomorrow for a meeting." Sarah's heart sank. "Yes, sir. May I ask what the nature of the complaint is?" "Conduct unbecoming an officer. Excessive force against civilians. It's serious, Mitchell. I don't believe a word of it, but I have to follow protocol. Bring any evidence you have to support your version of events." After she hung up, Sarah sat down heavily. This was escalating faster than she had anticipated. "They're going after my career," she said to Jack. "If this gets into my service record, it could affect everything. My promotion prospects, my security clearance, everything I've worked for." Jack's face was set in hard lines. "Then we need to find a way to stop them." The rest of the day was tense. Sarah picked up Emma from school and tried to act normal, helping with homework and making dinner. But her mind was racing, thinking about the meeting tomorrow, about Jessica Horn, about the 3 men who were trying to destroy her career to cover up their own wrongdoing. That evening, after Emma went to bed, Sarah sat in the living room with Jack and her mother, discussing options. "You could get a lawyer," Grace suggested. "Fight this properly." "That takes time and money," Sarah replied. "And even if I win, the damage to my reputation will already be done." "What about the young woman?" Jack asked. "Is there any way to convince her to tell the truth?" "I don't know, she's terrified, and honestly I don't blame her." They were still talking when Sarah's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "I'm sorry I lied. They threatened my family, but I saved the recording. I had my phone in my pocket, it was recording the whole time. If you want it, meet me tomorrow morning at the coffee shop on Main Street, 7 a.m. Come alone. Jessica." Sarah showed the message to Jack and Grace. "It could be a trap," Grace said immediately. "Or it could be our way out of this," Sarah countered. Jack studied the message carefully. "If you go, I'm going too. Not with you but nearby, just in case." Sarah wanted to argue, to say she could handle it herself. But the truth was, she was glad to have backup. "Okay," she agreed, "but stay out of sight. If she sees anyone with me, she might bolt." The next morning, Sarah arrived at the coffee shop at 6:45. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows across Main Street. She ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching the door. At 7 sharp, Jessica walked in. The young woman looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. She ordered a drink and then slid into the seat across from Sarah. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said quietly. "Thank you for reaching out," Sarah replied. "Are you okay?" Jessica shook her head. "No, I'm not. I've been sick about this since yesterday. My mom raised me to tell the truth and I lied to the police. But those men, Danny Reichert called my house. Said if I didn't change my story, bad things would happen to my little brother. He's only 12. Sarah felt anger burning in her chest. Jessica, what they're doing is intimidation. It's illegal. I know. That's why I recorded everything. She pulled out her phone, her hands shaking slightly. When they cornered me in the alley, I pressed record in my pocket. I always do that when I feel unsafe. It's everything they said, everything you said, the whole thing. She played the recording for Sarah. It was clear, damning evidence. The men's voices making crude comments, Jessica telling them to leave her alone, Sarah's calm voice warning them to back off, and then the sounds of the confrontation with Jack. This changes everything, Sarah said. With this recording, we can prove what really happened. I want to give it to you, Jessica said, but I'm scared. What if they come after me, after my family? Sarah reached across the table and took Jessica's hand. I understand your fear, but I promise you I will do everything in my power to protect you. And there are people who can help, people who won't let the Reicherts get away with this. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. My dad died 2 years ago. He was in the army. He always said that standing up for what's right was the hardest thing anyone could do, but also the most important. I think he'd be disappointed in me for lying. Your dad would understand, Sarah said gently. You were protecting your family, there's no shame in that. But now you have a chance to do the right thing, and you won't be alone. Jessica wiped her eyes and nodded. She sent the recording to Sarah's phone, then gave her a written statement detailing everything that had happened, including Danny Reichert's threatening phone call. They were finishing up when Sarah noticed movement outside the window. Jack was across the street, and he was watching 3 men approaching the coffee shop. Sarah saw them coming before Jessica did. Danny Reichert and his 2 friends from the alley, walking with purpose toward the coffee shop. She had seconds to make a decision. Jessica, I need you to go to the bathroom, Sarah said quickly. Now, lock the door and don't come out until I tell you it's safe. Jessica's face went pale, but she moved quickly, grabbing her bag and hurrying toward the back of the cafe. Sarah stood up and positioned herself near the front counter, between the door and the rest of the cafe. There were only 2 other customers, an elderly couple in the corner and the young barista behind the counter. The door swung open and the 3 men walked in. Danny Reichert spotted Sarah immediately and smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Well, look who's here, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. The Navy hero. Sarah kept her voice calm and level. Gentlemen, can I help you with something? The stocky one, whose name she had learned was Kyle, laughed. Help us? That's funny. You've already helped us plenty. Nice of you to assault us and then lie about it to the police. I told the truth to the police, Sarah said evenly. Maybe you should try it sometime. Danny stepped closer, invading her personal space. The barista looked nervous, her hand moving toward what Sarah assumed was a panic button or phone. Here's the thing, Danny said, his voice dropping to a threatening whisper. My uncle is a powerful man in this town, and you're nobody, just some woman playing soldier. By the time we're done, you'll be lucky if you have a job cleaning toilets. Sarah didn't flinch. Is that a threat? It's a promise. The one with the scar, whose name was Marcus, added from behind Danny. Before Sarah could respond, the door opened again. But it wasn't Jack who walked in. It was a man in his early 60s, wearing a crisp naval uniform with enough gold braid and ribbons to make Sarah's eyes widen. The eagles on his shoulders marked him as a Navy captain, and the presence he carried spoke of someone even higher up the chain. Behind him came Jack, and behind Jack, Officer Bradley and 2 other police officers. The cafe fell silent. The naval officer looked around the room with sharp, assessing eyes. When he spoke, his voice carried absolute authority. Which one of you is Daniel Reichert? Danny looked confused, his earlier confidence wavering. I am who's asking. Rear Admiral James Harrison, the officer replied. and I'm here because your activities have come to the attention of the Department of the Navy." Sarah felt her heart skip. A rear admiral, 2 full ranks above her. What was happening? Admiral Harrison continued. "You filed a false complaint against Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, a decorated naval officer. You threatened a civilian witness to cover up harassment and attempted assault. And from what I'm hearing, this isn't the first time you and your associates have engaged in this behavior." Danny's face had gone from confident to pale in seconds. "I don't know what you're talking about. This is a local matter. You have no authority here." "Actually," Officer Bradley stepped forward, "we invited the Admiral here. See, when we started digging into your background, Danny, we found some interesting things. Federal things. Those supplements you've been selling at your gym. The ones you order from overseas. Turns out they contain controlled substances. That's interstate commerce, which makes it a federal crime." Kyle and Marcus were already edging toward the door, but the other 2 officers blocked their path. Admiral Harrison looked at Sarah. "Commander Mitchell, I apologize that it took us this long to get here. Your father-in-law called me last night." Sarah looked at Jack in surprise. He gave her a small smile. The Admiral continued. "Jack Collins and I served together for 15 years. When he told me what was happening, I made some calls. By the time we got the full picture, it was clear this needed to be handled at the highest level." "I want my lawyer," Danny said, but his voice had lost all its swagger. "You'll get one," Bradley said, pulling out handcuffs. "Daniel Reichert, Kyle Morrison, Marcus Chen, you're under arrest for witness intimidation, assault, and pending federal charges related to controlled substance distribution." As the 3 men were let out in handcuffs, Sarah felt something release in her chest. The weight she'd been carrying since yesterday, the fear that her career was over, the anger at the injustice of it all seemed to lift. Jessica emerged from the bathroom, her eyes wide. When she saw the police taking the men away, she started crying with relief. Admiral Harrison approached Sarah and extended his hand. "Commander Mitchell, I've reviewed your service record. You've conducted yourself with honor throughout this entire ordeal. The complaint against you has been dismissed, and a formal commendation will be added to your file for your actions in protecting a civilian." "Thank you, sir," Sarah managed to say, shaking his hand. "I was just doing what was right." "That's what we all should do," the Admiral replied. "But not everyone has the courage to do it when it's difficult." He glanced at Jack. "Your father-in-law spoke very highly of you. Now I see why." After the Admiral left, along with the police and the arrested men, Sarah found herself alone with Jack, Grace, and Jessica in the coffee shop. The elderly couple had left, wide-eyed and probably already calling their friends to tell them about the excitement. Jessica hugged Sarah tightly. Thank you so much. I was so scared, but you made me feel brave." "You were already brave," Sarah told her. "You just needed someone to remind you." After Jessica left, promising to stay in touch, Sarah turned to Jack. "You called an admiral. How do you even know an admiral?" Jack smiled. "I wasn't just Navy, Sarah. I was a SEAL. Admiral Harrison and I did 3 tours together. He owes me a few favors. I figured this was a good time to call one in." Sarah felt tears welling up. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Jack said firmly. "You're family. And more than that, you're exactly the kind of officer the Navy needs. I wasn't going to let some small-town bullies destroy what you've built." Grace put her arm around Sarah's shoulders. "Your father would be proud," she said softly. "I'm proud too." That evening, Sarah sat on the porch with Emma, watching the sunset over Bridgeport. Her daughter was curled up beside her, reading a book about astronauts. "Mommy," Emma said suddenly, "Grandpa told me you were very brave yesterday." "I just did what needed to be done," Sarah replied. "He said you helped someone who was scared, even though bad men were trying to stop you." "That's true." Emma looked up at her with those bright, curious eyes. "Will you teach me to be brave like you?" Sarah pulled her daughter close. "You're already brave, sweetheart, but yes, I'll teach you everything I know." Inside the house, Jack and Grace were making dinner. Sarah could hear them talking and laughing, the sounds of family filling the home. For the first time in 3 years since David had died, the house felt complete again. The next week brought more changes. The story of what had happened spread through Bridgeport quickly. The local newspaper ran a feature on Sarah, calling her a hometown hero. Several other women came forward with their own stories about the Reicherts, emboldened by Jessica's courage and Sarah's actions. Danny Reichert's uncle resigned from the city council in disgrace. The federal investigation into the supplement business uncovered a larger operation involving several other people in town. The three men faced serious charges that would likely result in prison time. Jessica Horn enrolled in community college and started volunteering at the local women's shelter. She and Sarah became friends, with Jessica often coming over for dinner and bringing Emma small gifts. Admiral Harrison made good on his promise. Sarah received a commendation for her actions, and when a promotion board convened 3 months later, she was selected for commander, a full rank promotion and a significant recognition of her service. But perhaps the most important change was the one within Sarah herself. For years, she had felt like she had to prove herself, to show that she was tough enough, strong enough, good enough to deserve her place in the Navy. She had carried the weight of being a woman in a male-dominated field, the weight of being a widow, the weight of being a single mother. Now she understood something that Jack had tried to tell her. Strength wasn't about proving yourself to others. It was about standing up for what was right, even when it was hard, even when you were scared, even when you felt alone. And she wasn't alone. She had her daughter, her mother, and now her father-in-law, who decided to retire from the Navy and move to Bridgeport permanently to be closer to his granddaughter. 1 month after the incident, Sarah stood in front of her recruitment office, watching young people come and go. A young woman, probably about 19, approached hesitantly. "Excuse me," the girl said. "Are you Commander Mitchell?" "I am," Sarah replied with a smile. "I read about you in the paper, about what you did for that girl in the alley. I've been thinking about joining the Navy, but I wasn't sure I was strong enough. But then I saw what you did, and I thought, if she can be brave like that, maybe I can too." Sarah felt her heart swell with pride. Strength comes in many forms. The fact that you're here, asking questions, considering service, that takes courage. Come inside. Let's talk about what the Navy might offer you. As they walked into the office together, Sarah glanced back at the street. Jack was there, standing beside his car, watching with a proud smile. He gave her a small salute, which she returned. She thought of David and how he had always believed in her, how he had told her that she would do great things, change lives, make a difference. Maybe he had been right all along. That evening, Emma asked Sarah to tell her a bedtime story. Instead of reading from a book, Sarah told her daughter about a young woman who learned that being brave didn't mean never being scared. It meant doing the right thing even when you were afraid. "Like you, Mommy?" Emma asked sleepily. "Like all of us," Sarah replied. "We all have that strength inside us. We just have to choose to use it." As Emma drifted off to sleep, Sarah stood by the window, looking out at the quiet street. The small town of Bridgeport would probably never know the full story of what had happened. They wouldn't know about the late-night phone calls Jack had made, pulling strings and calling in favors. They wouldn't know about the fear Sarah had felt, wondering if her career was over. But they would know that when someone needed help, a Navy officer had stepped up. That when justice seemed impossible, people had fought for it anyway. That courage wasn't about being the biggest or the strongest. It was about having a good heart and refusing to back down. 3 months later, Sarah stood on a small stage at the community center, speaking to a group of young women about careers in the military. Jessica was in the front row, now enrolled full-time in college and studying criminal justice. The young woman from the recruitment office, Maria, sat beside her, having signed her enlistment papers the week before. As Sarah talked about service, sacrifice, and the importance of standing up for others, she saw Admiral Harrison slip into the back of the room. He had come to Bridgeport for a formal ceremony the next day, where Sarah would receive her promotion to commander in front of her family and community. But what mattered more than any rank or recognition was the faces in front of her. Young women who were learning that they could be strong, that their voices mattered, that they could make a difference. After the talk, a mother approached Sarah with her teenage daughter. "Thank you," the mother said, tears in her eyes. "My daughter was bullied at school. She was afraid to stand up for herself. But after she heard what you did, she reported the bullying to the principal. The school is finally taking action." The teenage girl looked at Sarah shyly. "You showed me that being brave isn't about being perfect or never being scared. It's about doing the right thing anyway." Sarah knelt down to look the girl in the eyes. "That's exactly right. And you know what? You're already braver than you think. It takes real courage to stand up to bullies, especially when you're afraid. I'm proud of you." As the event ended and people filed out, Jack approached with Emma, who was carrying a drawing she had made during the talk. "Look, Mommy," Emma said, holding up the picture. It showed a woman in a Navy uniform standing tall with a cape flowing behind her. "It's you, the superhero." Sarah laughed and hugged her daughter. "I'm not a superhero, baby. I'm just your mom." "Grandpa says that's the same thing," Emma replied matter-of-factly. Jack smiled. "David used to say that ordinary people doing extraordinary things, that's the real definition of a hero. You proved him right, Sarah." That night, after Emma was asleep and the house was quiet, Sarah sat on the porch with Jack, watching the stars come out over Bridgeport. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for everything you did, for believing in me." "I didn't do anything," Jack replied. "You were the one who had the courage to step into that alley. You were the one who refused to back down. I just made a phone call." "It was more than that, and you know it." Jack was quiet for a moment. "David told me once that he married you because you had the strongest sense of right and wrong of anyone he'd ever met. He said you'd rather lose everything than compromise your principles. I didn't fully understand what he meant until I saw you in that alley, standing up to 3 men who could have hurt you, just to protect a stranger." Sarah felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "I miss him so much." "I know, so do I." Jack put his arm around her shoulders. "But he lives on in you and in Emma, in the way you face the world with courage and kindness. That's his legacy and yours." They sat in comfortable silence, two people who had been brought together by loss but had found strength in family. The next day, during the promotion ceremony, Sarah stood at attention while Admiral Harrison pinned the new rank insignia on her uniform. The community center was packed with people from Bridgeport, naval personnel from nearby bases, and reporters who had heard about the story. But Sarah's eyes were on 3 people in the front row. Emma, who was sitting on Grace's lap, waving excitedly. Grace, who was crying tears of joy. And Jack, who stood at attention, pride evident in every line of his face. In that moment, Sarah understood that justice wasn't just about punishing wrongdoers or following rules. It was about creating a world where people felt safe to stand up for what was right, where the strong protected the weak, where courage was celebrated and cowardice had consequences. As the ceremony ended and people applauded, Jessica made her way through the crowd to hug Sarah. "You changed my life," Jessica said. "Because of you, I'm not afraid anymore. I'm going to become a lawyer. I want to help people like you helped me." Sarah hugged her back. "You're going to be amazing. And remember, you changed your own life. I just gave you a little push." The celebration continued late into the evening, but eventually people drifted home. Sarah found herself once again on her porch, this time with Emma curled up beside her, fighting sleep. "Mommy," Emma murmured, "when I grow up, I want to be just like you." Sarah kissed her daughter's forehead. You can be even better than me, sweetheart. You can be yourself." As Emma finally fell asleep, Sarah carried her inside and tucked her into bed. In the hallway, she paused to look at the photos on the wall. David in his uniform, young and proud. Her parents on their wedding day. Emma as a baby. And now, a new photo that Jack had taken. Sarah in her uniform, standing with Jessica, both of them smiling at the camera. Two women who had found their courage in a dark alley behind Main Street. Sarah thought about the journey that had brought her here. The doubts, the struggles, the times she had been underestimated and dismissed. Every challenge had made her stronger. Every setback had taught her something valuable. She thought about the three men who had tried to intimidate her, to use their connections and power to escape consequences. They were in jail now, facing justice at last. But more importantly, their reign of fear over Bridgeport was over. Other victims were coming forward. The town was healing. And Sarah had learned something important. She didn't need to prove herself to anyone. Her worth wasn't determined by whether people recognized it. It was determined by her actions, her choices, and the content of her character. As she got ready for bed, Sarah heard a soft knock on her door. It was Jack. "Just wanted to say good night," he said, "and to tell you that I'm proud to call you my daughter-in-law. David chose well." "Thank you, Jack, for everything." "One more thing," he added. "Admiral Harrison asked me to give you this." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a letter, written on official Navy stationery. It was from Admiral Harrison, but it quoted from something much older, a letter that Jack had written about Sarah to the Admiral, calling in that favor. The letter described Sarah's courage, her dedication to service, and her unwavering commitment to doing what was right. But the final paragraph made Sarah's breath catch. "Commander Mitchell represents the very best of what the Navy stands for. She is proof that true strength comes not from physical power or rank, but from moral courage and an unshakable commitment to justice. If we had more officers like her, we would have a better Navy and a better world." Sarah looked up at Jack with tears in her eyes. "You wrote this?" "Every word is true," he replied simply. After Jack left, Sarah sat on her bed, holding the letter. She thought about the scared young woman in the alley, the intimidating men who had thought they were untouchable, and the chain of events that had led to justice being served. She thought about Emma, growing up with a mother who had shown her that standing up for others was worth any cost. About Jessica, who had found her courage and was now pursuing a career in law. About the other women who had come forward, inspired by their example. One person's choice to do the right thing had created ripples that spread far beyond that single moment in the alley. That was the real power of courage. It was contagious. As Sarah turned off the light and settled into bed, she felt at peace. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to serve, new chances to make a difference. But tonight she would rest, knowing that she had honored her oath, protected the innocent, and shown her daughter what it meant to be brave. Outside, the stars shone over Bridgeport, California. In a small house on a quiet street, a Navy commander slept peacefully, surrounded by family and knowing that justice had been served. And somewhere, Sarah liked to think, David was smiling, proud of the woman he had married and the legacy of courage they had built together.